radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. The Spoke Radio for the masses. That's right. How you doing? How you doing? Today's Monday, September 23rd, 2019. 267 days into the new year. Just 98 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California, and I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? It's Monday. That's right. Another amazing week. Tonight, very special guest, Whitley Strieber is here. Whitley and I tonight are going to have a very open conversation about ET, UFOs, what's going on today. Yeah, I'm going to spin it around a little bit. I want Whitley's opinion on everything. Of course, the author of the Communion series of books and many novels ranging from the Wolfen to the Hunger to the Greys and his exciting Alien Hunter series. Communion, the Wolfen, the Hunger, and Superstorm have all been made into movies. Superstorm as The Day After Tomorrow. I actually watched that last week. Tonight, we're going to have a very open conversation on the current state of UFOs and ET contact, our government, community, and dive deep in with someone who has been researching the subject for the last 4 decades. And I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black our good friend, Whitley Strieber. Whitley, good evening. How are you, man? Oh, Whitley. Whitley dropped right as I said, Whitley. Oh, let me pull him back up here. That was bizarre. Whitley, good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, that was bizarre. You dropped as I said good evening.
Yeah, it was very strange.
Yeah.
I was here, and then you weren't here anymore. You
know what's funny, Whitley? Let's start off here, actually. I just mentioned, you've been doing this for, 4 decades, right? It's pretty crazy to think about.
Oh, God. Don't say it.
but at any point, I don't freak out anymore when it comes to interference or technical difficulties. It's just part of the game, isn't it? Do things affect you anymore?
Oh, listen, Dreamland, hardly a week passes that weird stuff doesn't happen. A couple shows ago, I forget which one it was, we had someone else on the line. Oh, yeah. The show hasn't aired yet. It's with a guy named Alan Steinfeld. Interesting guy. And a lot of experiences and a really bright guy. Anyway, you could hear, and it's especially true when I talk to close encounter witnesses and abductees, you could hear someone picking up the phone and putting it down again and breathing into the line and stuff. And that's just sort of par for the course. It happens all the time. I'm just used to it. My listeners are too.
Yeah, it is. When I used to I did sportscasting before Fade to Black, right? Many years ago, 10 years ago. And never a technical issue. You know what, Whitley? I'm going to go on the record right now and say that the 3 years that I did sportscasting, not one single technical hiccup. Not a one. Start doing this stuff. And at the beginning, I would get so angry because I wasn't used to it. But now it's just whatever. I just laugh.
Just water off the duck's back. I mean, you say you're going to call me at 7:28. I'm sitting here. I answer the phone, and you're gone.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Let's go in this direction to kick things off. With the mass media jumping on board where we are today. Did you anticipate a day, an era where UFOs would be okay to talk about in public, both with the mass media and with people on the street? Did you think that this day would arrive like it has?
Oh yeah, I've known it for a long time because I have the visitors in my life, and they're very clear about timelines and what's happening, and they're never wrong. And years ago, they said that this would come into focus as the planet's environment fell apart around our ears. And that's what's happening, and that's why it's coming into focus as far as I'm concerned.
Now, I read the news, Whitley. I don't watch it. Okay, there's a distinct difference there. I read it, I don't watch it.
I do the same thing. I agree.
Yeah, and when did you start to make that shift?
Oh, listen, I made the shift before I even knew the visitors were in my life. And maybe they were there and I didn't know it, or maybe they came into my life because of it. I'm not sure. But back when I wrote Nature's End, which was published in 1985, there's a huge chapter in there about a gigantic forest fire in the Amazon. And the book is set in 2025. So, I'm 5 years early. I mean, this is 5 years early.
Right.
And there's a book's full of all kinds of stuff like that. It even gets into the level of weirdness because there's an automobile brand in the book called the Hunyadi. And a few years later, the Hyundai shows up. And, it's kind of weird. But I can assure you, though, you don't want to be a prophet. It's very, very, very bad for your pocketbook.
Well, you did it, and I watched Superstorm, the day after tomorrow. I watched it last week, and I watched it from beginning to end. I've seen it many times. So many of us have. But I started to just think to myself how far ahead of the curve you were and this movie compared to where we are today. Again, a pretty accurate vision of the future.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, I don't know. I do know, actually. I can explain that. Art and I published Superstorm, the book that Day After Tomorrow is based on. You wouldn't know it because Hollywood being Hollywood, they very trickily managed to put our credit at the end of the movie rather than at the beginning. So, there was not much, didn't juice the book very much. But in any case, we wrote Superstorm in 1997 and 98, and it was published in 99. Now, the reason that happened was that I had an experience in 98 with this man I call the master of the key, who said a lot of extraordinary things. There's a little book out, people probably know about it, called The Key, which if you read it, it's like reading the future. And you remember, how could this have been written in those years? Anyway, I was telling Art about this. The Key hadn't been published yet, this stuff, and we were trying to figure out what to do with it. And the next thing I knew, we were talking about doing a book about it. And so we did, and we used the material that I had learned from him And, what I did was I took things from him and I began to dig around in the scientific record of those days. And when you looked deeply enough, you could find these ideas about these huge storms that had been existing in the past. And so that was the genesis of the book. And, we brought the key out pretty much at the same time. And I hope I'm getting my dates right. Sometimes I get them mixed up. But anyway, it's all about the same time. And whoever he was, it's a real mystery. I mean, I was in a hotel in Toronto. It was the last night of what would turn out to be the last author tour I would ever do. And I was sleeping, and someone knocked on the door. I woke up and saw the room service tray still sitting on the little desk in the room, and I figured, it's a room service waiter. I didn't realize it was 2:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I opened the door, and this man comes in, and he walks right past the tray and goes over to the window, turns around, and starts talking. And initially, I think I had better try to throw this guy out because this is not good. I'd had a situation where I was in a hotel in Chicago, and I come into the room after my day of travails and work, and flop down on the bed. Closet door opens, and a woman comes out.
What?
So she'd paid off some room service guy or something. I'd been on TV and radio that day, and she'd wanted to get in my room, and I suppose into my bed, and her methodology was unfortunate. Let me put it that way, because I ran out of the room actually, and went downstairs and got a security guard, and they got rid of her that way. She seemed like a perfectly nice person, but she just had a bad idea about how to get in, touch with me. Anyway, I'm married, and I was married then, and I'm not a fool arounder, so that was never going to happen anyway. Okay, so that had happened. And now this guy comes in. I realize it's really late. I'm not sure exactly what time it is at that point. And he's not the room service waiter. He's trying to talk to me. It can't be good. No one who comes into your room, hotel room, unannounced after midnight is good, period. That person has got to be gotten out of there quickly, or you have to run like hell. Take your choice.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy.
Right. So I started he was not big. He was slight, and he didn't look armed. In fact, he was wearing a close-fitting gray crew neck, as I recall, and darker gray pants. So I could see there was nothing there. In other words, there's no bulge of a pistol or any kind of a weapon. So I started to go after him. And he starts talking about the Holocaust. And he proceeds to say something that just sort of stopped me in my shoes, because he says, if the unborn child, if an unborn, you can read the key and it's right there, but to the effect, I have to paraphrase it because I haven't got the book in front of me, that if this child who was unborn when his parents were gassed had been born, he would have solved the riddle of gravity and freed mankind from the bounds of Earth. And because he died, we are chained to the earth. Mm-hmm. And you hear something like that, unlike any words anyone had ever spoken to me before in my life.
Right.
That are also mind-bending and terrifying. You change from a guy who wants to throw a nut out of his room to someone who wants to listen to this person.
Yeah, you were fully awake at that point, I would assume.
Oh, yeah, I was way awake.
Do you look at, speaking that and looking to the future, and you think of Superstorm today? I need your opinion of what's going on with global warming and this climate change. Is this the Earth? Is this something natural? Is this solar? or is this created by us? Where are you on this?
Well, interglacials last between 10 and 15,000 years. Our planet has been in a state where it has been moving back and forth between glaciations and temperate interglacials for nearly 3 million years. And the end of the last glacial age, speaking of Göbekli Tepe, which I think your listeners have heard something about before.
Yes.
Anyway, that was created during the upheaval that followed the end of the Ice Age that was the beginning of the current interglacial.
Right.
It's about, 9,000 BC, so 12,000 years ago. Now, that means that we don't really understand what causes this change. We think it has something to do with the planet's orbit, but the planet right now isn't in an orbit that would suggest that it's going to go into an ice age. What has happened on the Earth since we started lighten up, let me put it that way, is that an enormous amount of carbon dioxide has gone into the atmosphere. In the past, this happened because of volcanoes, where there would be periods of volcanism and huge amounts of carbon dioxide would go into the atmosphere. The planet would warm to an extremely high level, and everything would die out, and then it would slowly come back again. And that's happened time and time again. It's a pattern on planet Earth. But right now, we are the volcano. It's as simple as that. And people will flip over backwards trying to say it's not us. But that ain't true. There's nobody else doing it. There's no other place it's coming from. So yeah, it is us. And I'm personally, I'm very close at this point in my life to the visitors. I'm not going to be coy about it anymore. I'm close. And this is their belief and their knowledge. And I would never turn away from that, because I've never known them to be wrong about anything in my life. They know what they are talking about. And I'll tell you another thing. They're desperate. They're desperate to get this thing working. They want to come out. They want to get into communication. But right now, because of the situation we are in, they can't, because communicating with them is nothing whatsoever like anything anybody may think or imagine right now. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I have finished a book, which I'm going to have out in October, I hope. I would like to publish it with a publisher, but they're saying, no, sir, you get it out there right now. Right now. It's that urgent. That will give not a how-to about how to communicate with them, but a description of how I have succeeded in doing this over the years. And it's not something I can just sit down and say, oh, well, I did this and this and this. It's much deeper and more complex than that, because whatever they are, and I'm not even saying they're aliens. I don't know what they are.
Right.
Whatever they are really, really different from us. Really different.
What do we do about this climate change then? Is there...
It's an emergency.
Well, is there one specific, is there one thing that is doing it? Or is it...
it's too much. We're burning too much oil and too much. China is trying at least to cut down its carbon emissions, but it won't be until next year that they are even getting to the point where they're not emitting more and more every year, because China runs on coal. It runs on coal.
It does.
There was a period of time during China's major industrialization in the 80s and 90s that they were putting up a new power plant every week.
They're doing that now. This was about 10 years ago. I'm with an engineer from Bechtel, right? And anyway, I'm not going to get into specifics, but he told me right direct. He goes, yeah, well, we've got 50 contracts right now building coal electric plants in China.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody.
50.
The Germans did, the French did, everybody did. The
50.
English had.
Not one, not two, 50. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So, the problem is that, basically if every Chinese gets to drink beer, there is no beer left in the world. And you have a situation where, and here's the visitor's perspective, by the way. It's completely different. They don't see this. They don't even see our wars as political issues. They see this all as having to do with a population that expanded too fast. They don't think of it. They don't blame anybody. They don't think of it as being anybody's fault. They think only totally objectively that there are simply too many human beings.
Right.
And their concept is that we can build better and better technologies, and the more technologies we build, in effect, the smaller each individual's emissions become. In other words, right now, the emission profile of a given Chinese might be 10 feet tall. But if they were to get that huge solar array in the Gobi Desert going and begin to close down their power plants, that emission profile is going to go down to 8 feet tall, then 6 feet tall, then 3 feet tall. Finally, the Chinese individual Chinese emission profile is going to be tiny. And the same thing is true anywhere in the world. So we can make the planet bigger with technology. We can give ourselves a bigger atmosphere with technology. But we don't actually think that way at all. They think that way, but not us. Like the wars, the terrible wars of the 20th century, and this is also a warning from them, folks. Those wars had nothing to do, or they don't even care about politics. They don't know anything about it at all. They see this only as an instinctive reaction to population pressure. And apparently it's something that I would guess happens all the time. That a species like ours, not really fully conscious of itself yet, gets to be overpopulated. And if you look at the history of world wars in 20th century, they were all caused by the same thing. Small, very highly evolved, technologically advanced countries feeling trapped in their space. The Germans wanted what Hitler called Lebensraum. And in the First World War, it was different. They regard that as not a war, but as a murder, as a something like I can't get the word, but it's something like a seizure of murder, where older men who are the alpha males murdered all of the younger ones because the younger ones were too numerous. And if you look in nature, the older alpha males will kill the younger males any chance they get in many species. What we didn't realize is that's true of us too, but they do know it because they know where we came from. They know our instincts better than we do, way better.
Do you think, I'm going to get your opinions on a bunch of different subjects tonight. One of them, briefly, we can pick this up after the break, is evolution, because we're talking about these cycles that this planet goes through, and we look at everything here, whether Darwin was right or wrong, he was wrong, but whether he was right or wrong isn't as big of an outlook as the us, Homo sapiens sapien, where we, you and I, and our families have been around for about 200,000 years, which we didn't have time to evolve. All the other species on this planet seem to be in stasis. I don't see evolution going on with monkeys and apes and sharks and dolphins and elephants and whatever. It doesn't really matter. Were we an accident, or were we deposited here? Were we created?
I have tried to get a straight answer out of them for that for a long, long time. And I only get ideas. If we were created and we are looking at our creators, then they made some kind of mistake here, I think. Because
why would you say that?
I'll tell you exactly what the mistake is.
Okay.
The mistake is, they gave us very big brains with good memories. They took off all of our hair and fur. They moved our genitals from beneath our bodies to the front, and they eliminated seasonality, meaning that we have sexual desire 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the year round. We are very fixated on sexuality because we're more naked than any other creature on Earth. We have very prominent genitals and very prominent breasts and so forth. I mean, any guy is going to, if he's heterosexual, is going to definitely be able to vividly visualize any woman he sees that he is attracted to, how she might look naked. And that nakedness is one of the things that has caused us to have so many babies. Now, the other thing is our brains are exquisitely supplied with memory. So we remember the pleasures of sex tremendously, detailed, and we want more. Of course we want more. Everybody does. But also we end up in a situation where these brilliant minds can do things like survive an ice age. 100,000 years ago, when the ice age started, we were basically running around naked. We didn't have any tribes. There was nothing to us. We were forest creatures. But by the time that ice age ended, we were organized into tribes. We were wearing clothing made from other animals' skins. We had survived a situation that would have been impossible to survive without a big brain. But unlike the animals, we had to survive it. We had to fight for our lives because we had no fur. How does a creature evolve in a world where everything obviously has fur and because it needs fur to live? How does this one creature end up with no fur? Is a practical joke or what? I think we might have been designed. I'm not at all adverse to that idea.
I do have an uncle with a lot of hair on his back, though.
You have what?
An uncle with a lot of hair on his back, and that used.
Yeah, I knew a guy who had a huge amount of hair, and girls used to piss him off by setting his leg hair on fire.
We need to take a break. Yeah, let's take a break right here. It's a good spot to do it. Our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We've got an amazing week tonight, which starts tonight with Whitley. Tomorrow night, Nick Redfern. Wednesday night, Richard Dolan. Thursday night is open lines all night long. More with Whitley Strieber right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. You can follow us right now on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Whitley at Whitley Strieber. The links are right there in Twitter. Engage in the conversation. We're going to go through 2,000 or 3,000 tweets tonight during the show, and it's already fired up pretty good. And I do have some questions from the listeners too, Whitley, that are starting to stack up. But I wanted to. I've compiled a mental list on significant UFO and ET events over the last 70 years. And I've never heard you address these. I've heard you speak about them, but directly in what your opinions are on them. And I'm just curious. And I want to start with 1947 and Roswell. And without preempting the question, what do you think happened at Roswell?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly what I think happened at Roswell. It was first of all, it's one of the most complicated events that has happened in human history. A object from an unknown source containing beings of an unknown kind crashed or was intentionally dropped 30 miles from the most secure military facility in the Western world. Now, the 509th Bomb Wing, stationed at the Roswell Army Air Force, at the base, was the only operational atomic bomber wing on planet Earth at that time. Spread across Europe at the border between Eastern and Western Europe were 4.5 million Russian soldiers who had just finished wiping out the Germans, were fantastically equipped, in a state of extraordinary readiness and high morale. And Allied estimates were that they could reach the English Channel within 6 weeks and probably succeed in crossing it. The only thing holding them back was not the relatively small remaining Allied forces in Western Europe, because we're democracies. And as soon as the war was over, we started sending everybody home, of course. Mm-hmm. They did not. Mm-hmm. It was those bombers. And here's the kicker. And I can't prove this, because if it's true, it's secret, but it doesn't really matter. It may be that we didn't actually have enough nuclear warheads there to do the job, to get to actually destroy Moscow, which is what Stalin feared would happen. But in any case, the arrival of an unknown aircraft within 30 miles of that base was a huge, huge threat. And that's before no one knew what the hell it was when the lid was dropped by the Pentagon on it. All they knew was an unknown craft had landed or crashed within 30 miles of the base. Now, what made this so dangerous was that if that craft had contained the correct types of nuclear detection equipment, it could have determined how much nuclear material was present on that airbase, and therefore how dangerous those planes actually were. So, you were Truman suddenly found himself looking at a threat to the freedom of the entire Western world. And that's why it initially became secret. Then what happened was this. The debris and the bodies, and there were bodies, were gathered up and taken first to Dallas and then on to where the plane basically stopped and refueled, and then on to Dayton, Ohio, to the Air Materiel Command, which was at Wright Field. Then it was then called Wright Field, where it was examined. Now, as it happens, one of the people examining it was my uncle, one of my uncles. Mm. One of the other people examining it was his close friend. Now, fast forward quite a few years. 1988, I published Communion. My uncle telephones me about 6 weeks later from where he lives in Lackland Air Force Base Retirement Unit at Lackland, and says, "Would you like to come down? I have some things I would like to talk to you about your book and the Roswell incident." Now, I knew about the Roswell incident because by that time I'd read a lot of stuff, and so I'd read Berlitz and Bill Moore's book, and so I said, "Sure, I'd love to." you understand, my uncle was one of the most secretive people on the planet, unless my father was more so, I don't know. But anyway, he never told anyone at all about what he did, except we all knew it was very, very secret. I don't know that he worked on this the entire time he was in the Air Force. I don't know what he worked on. Okay, so I go down there, and he and his wife take me to lunch, and me and Ann, and he tells me that he helped to examine the materials, and he describes them to me. And he then says that I should talk to Art Exon, his close friend. They'd been lifelong friends by that time, who knows more and would like to talk to me. And I said to him, you're telling me things that are obviously classified, and I know that, and you know that. And he said, no, we have the instructions to do this, and this is not illegal. And when he said that, he meant that, because he did not do things that were against the law. He's not a so-called whistleblower or anything like that. So I thought, wow, incredible. So we got home, and I called General Exon, and he proceeds to tell me quite a bit of stuff. We talked for quite a while. He tells me about the fact that there were bodies. He says to me, everyone from Truman on down knew that what we had found was not of this world within 24 hours of our finding it. He also said it was a relief because they were so scared that this was something from the Russians. Mm-hmm. But then I believe Curtis LeMay or one of those generals offered the opinion that it might be a scout ship from an invasion force from another world. And somehow there got worked into there the idea that they might be demons, because remember, in those days, we didn't know much of anything about outer space, very little. So the idea of planets and, it was a known thing, but these were people, General LeMay was a fundamentalist Christian, and, they looked to what they believed for an explanation of this strange thing. And so now, subsequently, I have seen the materials with my own eyes. They are real, and they have been studied and are being studied, and a lot of discoveries that have been made from those materials, and you can read about this in Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic, have been bled out into the public. I'm wearing a knee, an artificial knee in my left knee, that is as hard as it is in part because of things we have learned from these materials. Now, so this is part of what I know about Roswell. The other side of this coin is, why was it put down in that particular place? Why was it a crash and not just a landing in some very prominent place where people get out of the thing and help us in a straightforward way? The answer to that question is really fairly complicated, but let me just do it. First of all, the gap between us is huge. It has to be narrowed, and it can only be narrowed by us making discoveries that bring us closer to their level. If that doesn't happen, then when they show up, we become like beggars, supplicants. It's like when the British showed up at on an island in the Pacific where people had never seen her better. The Americans did in World War II, showed up on these little islands. People had never seen anything like an airplane or anything like the wealth that these GIs and airmen brought with them. They were completely disempowered. They felt useless and purposeless and like idiots when they saw what these people who had nothing whatsoever to do with their beliefs, their gods, their religion, or anything they understood about the world, what they actually had and could do. They were terribly diminished. Now, back in 1977, a little article was published in the April issue of Science magazine by D.B.H. Kuiper and Mark Morris, two physicists. I believe they were both physicists. And no, one of them was an astrophysicist. Kuiper discovered the Kuiper belt and so forth. Anyway, they published this speculation about why aliens, if they showed up here, would be secretive. And the reason was that they would only be interested in finding things that were new because they would know so much that anything new would be incredibly precious to them. And therefore, the visitors hung back and still hang back while donating, apparently with these accidents, materials to us that are enabling us to move ahead. Now, I don't know whether they understood this or not. They probably did, knowing them, that we would hide our discoveries out of fear that there is that our enemies would get wind of it and figure things out before we could. Right now, for example, I am aware of the fact, and I can't go into why, but I am aware of the fact that the United States, Russia, and China are in a real tussle about the secret of gravity, that someone is going to get that, and the power that gets that is going to, of course, be very dominant. But we need to get past all of that. It's too late. It's too late for the secrecy. You know, the March on Area 51 was a sort of total bust, as we talked about, or we'll talk about, and which is fine. I mean, I didn't expect it to be anything else, but it is a little rumble of thunder, distant lightning on the horizon, because you take a situation that could be happening within a few years, where a whole lot of people are starving in this country, or don't have water, or things are really, really, really coming apart at the seams. And all these people who were believers and followers and, yeah, global warming is nonsense, it's all rubbish, they are suffering and watching their kids suffer. They're going to be looking everywhere for information, for some kind of salvation. And one of the first places they're going to look is inside the hidden community that studies this stuff. And I'm telling you, the French aristocrats thought that they owned the world right before the French Revolution. A few years later, their heads were all going off. These people are our aristocrats. They're not the billionaires. These people who really know this stuff and really understand it, they are the ones at the absolute top of the food chain. And I'm warning them, and I'm guaranteeing to you they will be dragged out of the places where they are, and their secrets will be extracted from them. But it won't help. It won't help. That's not going to work. So I am hoping that we get into a situation soon where there can be coherent communication between us and the visitors, because right now we have not got a clue about how to do that. Not a clue. And there's nobody helping us.
And I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was speaking of the visitors in those terms like Roswell. I wanted to ask you in the exact same mindset with Rendlesham, where now we've got a military encounter that has gone very, very public. But were the visitors, well, what's your opinion on that? Was that us from the future? Was that something else? Was it a test? What's your opinion on Rendlesham?
Well, you know, I don't understand what time travel would be, because, you know, we know of certain forces in the universe. There is no force called time. What we see when we see time is entropy, the slow change that is caused by alterations in the energy levels of everything in the world around us. That's what causes time. Time is a kind of illusion. So how can you go back in an illusion? I have some fascinating information from the visitors about this from a long time ago, when I did ask them this question. And the answer, this is back when when we lived in our beloved little old cabin in upstate New York. I asked them this, and they said the future is like water. The present is a compressor that compresses it, and the past is like ice. You can't do much to change the past, but you can find bubbles here and there and go in those bubbles. And when you do that, you can see the past. And I thought to myself at the time, maybe also the past can see you. And maybe they know that. And maybe that somehow can echo forward into the present and the future. Because physics tells us that there's no particular reason that the time flows in the direction it does. It could flow in any direction. It could flow in the future or the past. So, yeah, I think there's something there in the time travel thing. But if that's it, it's a very limited something that they may have done that has maybe a rather limited effect. But they are so knowledgeable. They may have picked just the right point to where that limited effect would resonate and resonate and resonate until finally it changes its own future, which is an extraordinary, breathtakingly dramatic capability. I don't think it's completely out of the question, but I would be really surprised if that was the actual answer.
Do you remember when Jim Penniston said that when he touched the object, he got a download, and that it wasn't that they were us, right? And that's what he was told. And I always found that very, very interesting. If he was, if he was making it up, right? He could have gone certainly more fantastical and more dramatic than that. Saying that they are us, that puts a whole nother spin on this.
Well, when Annie saw that years ago, she said, "Oh, what happened to us?" It was a very funny answer, I thought. But there's another thing there, and that's this. If it is possible to somehow enter this frozen block of memory that is the past, if you wanted to change it, the one thing you could not do would be to cause the grandfather paradox to be enacted. That is to say that we know from having sent photons back into their own pasts that the grandfather paradox is real. They will never touch their past versions of themselves. Now, I mean, and this is theoretical. It's never been done physically. I hasten to add. So I'm just talking about math here, right? But math is the beginning of everything. So it's probably true. In any case, if you could do that, the one thing you would have to do would be to avoid seeming or appearing like something that was real. Because if you seemed to be something that was real, you could not trick the past into not activating the grandfather paradox. It would activate immediately and automatically.
And prevent. So you're saying the grandfather paradox would be prevented. There would the grandfather, you would be prevented from doing anything to change the past because of the grandfather paradox, right?
Unless you appeared to be something that wasn't real at all, and in fact were something that was unreal. You were an invention, and therefore the grandfather paradox might not be activated because there wouldn't be any reference point for it to activate against.
Right.
This is just a theoretical idea.
Right. That's very interesting. So why not?
So that might be why they look like they do, because that's not what they really are. Maybe it's just really us.
Right. And if you're going to go back in time and show up in Rendlesham Forest outside of an Air Force base, look like a flying saucer, right?
Look like something that doesn't exist.
Right.
And then you can do more than you would if you looked like something that did exist.
So for you, and looking at this, and maybe the visitors have mentioned this, ultimately, what was Rendlesham?
Well, I am a person who doesn't. I live by certain things, a lot of which I learned from Anne. One of the things she used to say and said is, the human species is too young to have beliefs. What we need are the good questions. And I live by that. So I can't tell you what I think Rendlesham was. I'm not going to say I believe this or I've concluded that, or based on this in this piece of evidence, I think that this is true. And the reason is that we don't have a ground of truth. We don't have any basic ground that we know is true. And why do I say that? I say that for two reasons. First, when you get down to the smallest, most basic, fundamental parts of the universe, what you have is indeterminacy. They're not anywhere. They're not anywhere. You know that the number of atoms compared to the amount of empty space in a piece of steel is literally infinitesimal.
Yep.
A piece of steel, everything, it's not 99% empty space. It's 99% to the nth power empty space.
That's right.
This doesn't exist. It's not here. It's something else.
And neither do you, right?
I'm not going to say what I believe because I don't believe anything I don't know.
There you go. That's a really, 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 really solid point. And the idea behind all of that, and especially when you listen to physicists speak about this directly, the amount of emptiness around us, we don't have a concept. We feel things, and we understand with that tactile side of things that things are solid. And this is our reality, but we don't understand. We don't grasp the emptiness. We don't understand it. Nobody understands the emptiness of everything. And you know what Einstein said. Einstein said matter is energy slowed down. So this is all energy. That's all this is about. There isn't matter versus energy. There's just different forms of energy. That's it.
That's it. That's exactly right.
And the equation goes backwards and forwards. E equals mc squared. Energy is mass. Mass is energy, and that's the end of the story. Yeah,
that's right.
Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Whitley Strieber. We're having a very open conversation on all things ET and UFO and other stuff. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. If you want to join in on the conversation tonight, on Twitter, hashtag F2B is the sandbox. Any questions for myself or Whitley tonight? Hashtag F2BQ. And, of course, both of our chat rooms are open at Spreaker and over at KGRA The Planet. Our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. And, Whitley, continuing on this, specifically about the military and what may be going on. Of course, we have all of the stories about today. We'll get to that later. But we have Malmstrom Air Force Base. And with UAPs and the Navy and the Air Force being the subject today, we have Malmstrom Air Force Base where it appeared that somebody was running interference over our missiles. Was this the visitors? Does the government understand what is going on?
I don't think the government does understand what's going on. I think if they understood what's going on, things would be different. And I'll tell you why. Back when the National Security Act of 1947 was passed, the act mandated that when the military engaged with something, the potential hostility or danger of which was unknown, it was to keep that secret. And this, I think, probably was put in there because of the Roswell incident and possibly other things where they were dealing with unknowns, and they wanted to be sure that those unknowns didn't slip out into the public simply because they didn't know what they were. Now, 70 years later, a few things are pretty obvious. One, it's not an invasion of any kind that we would expect, because that would be over by now. They're not trying to take over our planet. They're obviously not eating us. If they were eating us, we probably wouldn't have global warming. They're not. They're a benign presence, as far as we can see. So now the secrets are being kept not for that reason, but because of the possibility that weapons may be devised out of what we have and what we are learning. So the result of this is that the original reason, if you read the more recent acts, you'll find that this mandate for keeping things top secret has altered in order to include things that may impinge on the national security if they are revealed. In other words, processes and so forth that could be picked up by an enemy and turned into weapons against us. So the secrecy continues. So you get into a situation like that, and you have to ask yourself, if they really fully understood what was going on, would it be necessary to continue to hide it like they do? And unless they are being forced to hide it by the visitors, who were very clever in the beginning, they created a situation by showing up next door to that incredibly secure base where we would hide it. And as I pointed out earlier, they did that so that we could get a hold of the technology and give us a chance to catch up, so that we would not be supplicants, but we would rather be partners when we eventually came together in an open way. Now, something is wrong here. I think the secrets have been kept for too long. I think it's probably somewhere back in the 80s or even earlier, this should have started to get out into the public in a much more straightforward way. And as I said earlier, the result of this is going to be an explosion of anger eventually. And the intelligence community will be taken down by it almost certainly, because there'll be a revolution, not just here, but in all kinds of places all over the world, because, people get hungry and they get mad. So I can't answer the question directly. I don't know specifically what might have happened there. But what I can say is the way it looks, somebody was trying very hard to hide something.
Today, where we have, I'm of the opinion, I don't know specifically, but I'm of the opinion that with everything that is happening in such rapid fire over the last year and a half when it comes to the UFO question, all the way up to the Storm Area 51 event, actually, the way that this has been covered in the media, it seems that they may be trying to get out in front of something, of which I don't know. But I think that there are places on this planet that may be revealed, and that would be out of their control. And specifically, this face in Antarctica that I pushed out there and others did over the last couple of weeks. This face in Antarctica, which obviously people think of Sidonia and Mars and so forth. But this is a very interesting, I don't know what it is, but it's certainly a face. I don't know if it's natural or man-made. That part I don't know. But if something like that reveals itself, like the face in Antarctica, and goes worldwide, then the government would be, state actors around the world, faced with that dilemma, right? And maybe this is part of getting out in front of the story, spreading UFO around the world and getting everybody acclimated. What did you make of the face in Antarctica?
My problem is this. We are so good now with manipulating video, I don't know what to make of it. There's not enough information there. You can't, without having somebody I knew personally, to be honest, go out there and take pictures of the face. I just don't know what it is. Yeah, I don't know if it's fake or real. Yeah, I can't tell.
I think we're going to run with your quote here. Somebody just posted it up here in Twitter, and I'm scrolling back for what you just said. I've lost it. I don't know what I don't know. What was your quote right before the break?
No. What it was what Ann used to say is that the human species is too young to have beliefs. We need good questions.
I don't believe anything I don't know. That's your
exactly.
Yeah, I don't believe anything I don't know.
I don't know. And if I don't know, why should I believe it? I'm not going to believe something because somebody tells me it's true. I've been there and done that, and that is not a good idea. But I am going to say that, let me put this another way. The Antarctic is an ideal place, or it was an ideal place, to hide someone if you had a big, large thing going on. And I'll tell you something I know about this. Back in the communion days, and I believe it was 1989, I went on a world author tour, which included New Zealand, and I was in Auckland. And at night, the hotel overlooked the airport. There were planes coming and going at night. And the newspapers were full of this, that it was the U.S. Air Force. It was driving people crazy because these planes were blasting through the quiet skies of Auckland, New Zealand at night and driving people nuts. And this was literally at 24. You saw them during the day, too. It was just going on and on and on. And they were all going to Antarctica. And the New Zealand government would not put a stop to it and would not tell the public why. And people were furious. So even back then, something very big was being built in Antarctica. Very big. And here's the interesting thing. You don't see anything down there now that's that big. Therefore, what was being built is secret. See where I'm coming from?
I do.
Yeah. So, but what is it? I don't know. I won't I won't take the next step. I saw the planes. I figured out very quickly from reading the papers and talking to people just how many planes would have been involved, because it'd been going on for a year when I was there. And it was so, therefore, whatever was being done was gigantic. And it ain't there. So it is there. We just can't see it.
And I want to talk about abductions too. This is something that has always, it's been there, it's been discussed, but it's never really been out front. Of course, Travis Walton and his case, but going back to Betty and Barney Hill. Of course, you and Communion, although you weren't officially. Do you put yourself?
I was abducted. Come on.
Do you put yourself in that category?
Of course.
And
where else? I mean, I wake up in the middle of the night in a room full of aliens. It's not my bedroom. I didn't go there. Nobody took me. I mean, nobody said, "Oh, come with us."
Right.
So I was kidnapped.
And today, if we look at the numbers and the recent polling that has gone down, where are we on the abduction side of things? Is this something that the government knows about, doesn't know about? And when we are dealing with millions of people around the world with these same experiences, whether it's missing time or missing from their own home, this is something that has to be dealt with. Where are we today? It seems like now it's okay to talk about abductions, and more people are coming forward.
People are beginning to be able to talk about this because it's a very scary thing. Somebody is here from somewhere else. They're pretty fierce, pretty scary, and very powerful. And they're grabbing us out of our bedrooms in the middle of the night and screwing with us in weird ways and hopefully sending us back. But that's not entire. No one's absolutely certain of that it happens that way every time. Mm-hmm. So that's scary. It's scary. It's very scary. And talking about it, though, look, the major media right now is talking about the UAPs that they're now calling UAPs. I'm going back to flying saucers. I'm forget UFOs and UAPs. They're flying saucers. That's what they are. That's what they've always been. Let's face it. Mm-hmm. But in any case, they're talking about no one ever talks about what's coming out of them and what's happening. But look, at Rice University right now, the entire communion letters archive that Anne saved, thousands of letters, is there being archived and cataloged. And that material has to be addressed at some point. But there's got to be another big reason for the secrecy. I don't think the government can do one damn thing about it. Nothing at all. I think that the government is helpless. And what are we going to do? Say, yes, there are aliens here, and they come into your bedrooms and into your children's bedrooms all the time and do weird things to you that nobody understands, and we can't do a thing about it. Have a nice day. I don't think they're going to say that. I think they will die before they say that. Disclosure is not going to happen from us. It's going to happen from the other direction. The visitors are going to be the ones who disclose, and that's going to happen when we can take it, not before.
Are you surprised with all of the coverage in the mainstream media? I mean, we can't ask for more right now, right? They've been doing a pretty good job in covering the UFO question right now. But the world hasn't collapsed, right? You brought up entropy earlier, right? We have
not yet. It hasn't collapsed yet.
We haven't completely fallen apart.
Not yet. But, what I was just talking about is a serious thing, and there's deeper stuff there that hasn't been revealed that I don't have any intention of talking about because I can't prove it. But I think that it could be that there's a lot of stuff here that's really scary and that the government is not in control of it and that they're not going to reveal it until they absolutely have to. And then when they do finally reveal it, people are going to be terrified. I'm very afraid that's going to be the case.
Why hasn't the religion aspect of this is there? And you look at the size of Christianity on this planet and Islam and other religions. The official stance hasn't been taken from any of the large religions around the world. And that part I've been waiting for, too. I don't quite understand the silence there when they read the papers, right? They watch CNN and Fox News. They understand what's going on right now. And there has been a definite silence. But I haven't also seen religions collapse. And I find that interesting, too. It seems to be stable. I don't see, you know what I mean? I don't see insanity. I don't see the ungluing or the entropy.
It's because people don't know enough yet. They'll figure it out eventually, and then it'll all come unglued, probably, I would think. I'm not very optimistic about all of that stuff. I don't think that. I think that we don't know what we're dealing with yet. And those of us who do deal with it have a very hard time. It's rough. I've had a hard time for many years, and I don't now. Now it's great. It's wonderful. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. But at first, it was really hard. And that's why I'm writing this book, and I'm trying to get it out as fast as I can, because it chronicles how that occurred. And nobody's eaten me. I mean, I've been with them in my life for 30 years. I've slept in, listen, just last February, I was alone in a house in the country with them. Absolutely no one could help me. I couldn't get away. And I wasn't scared at all. And it was a good meeting, a very important meeting. It wasn't like we sat down at a table, because that's not how this works. They're not ever going to be sitting down at a table. But it was really informative and really helpful, and it helped me tremendously with the book.
Was it physical? Was it physical? What? Was it physical?
Yeah, to a degree, but they won't. When I say to a degree, I could hear them, I could see them to some extent, I could smell them. But what I couldn't do was come face to face with them, and that is rare in my life. And, I tell you another thing that happens. I'll give you an idea of why this is like this. I was at the Esalen Institute in Northern California, where there are meetings held, private meetings from time to time, that discuss this stuff. And my co-author of Supernatural, Jeff Kreifel, was there. And people are always sort of eager, kind of scared to stay in the room with me, because we double up in this thing. Because very often the visitors will show up when they're, and it can be very intimidating. And so what happened was this: in the middle of the night, one of them shows up in the room. I am lying facing a window, to make it easier for them to come to me, because they're going to be really shy when someone else is in the room. And I'm facing the window. It blows. My head is to the right, facing the window. It blows on my left hand, the back of my left hand. I immediately turn my head away from it. As I turn my head away from it, I see it for just a second, and it is absolutely devastating. Jeff doesn't see it, but he hears like a cascading, something crashing down, like everything is falling apart. And this is his unconscious reacting to the power of this presence. And he hears his voice, a voice that is his voice inside himself, say, "Oh my God." And he feels like the whole world is collapsing around him. Now, let me explain why this is. Here's why it is. They have a completely different vision of reality than we do. They don't see a narrow spectrum of time like we do. They see a whole wide spectrum of time. If we lose that narrow spectrum of time, our reason for existence is over. Because I know people don't think about their souls. We're soul. We've been anesthetized to the soul. We've gone soul blind because of all the material in the world. But it's still the only thing about us that really matters. And it is the only thing about us they're actually interested in. But in any case, if you don't have a continuous flow of spontaneous experience, your soul can't grow here, and your life is worthless. They showed me what this meant a couple of years ago. I had figured this out, and I was sitting, I do these meditations at 3:00 in the morning. It can be very productive. And I said, I know this is true. I want to know what it's like. And all of a sudden, there was a big crack in the room, which is always a signal that they have arrived. And I didn't see anyone, but I became like robotic. I knew everything that would happen for the next few minutes. And it wasn't like, oh, he knows the future. How cool. It was horrifying. It was like being a robot. And then it was over. And I thought to myself, no wonder we're scared of this, because this is like the end of your life. It's worse than death to lose your spontaneity and your will. And we may not have free will. We may not actually be spontaneous, but because that's how we feel, and that's how life feels to us, it impacts our souls in the most wonderful way. It's a wonderful thing to be the way we are. And to have to be like them, it's no wonder they're here. They would like to live inside us and with us and experience this exquisite sweetness too.
Did they evolve? Did they go through the same experiences that we have here? Right? Did they evolve the very same way?
You take one look at them and you think to yourself, oh, that's somebody with a history.
Right.
Sure. I had some of the dark blue guys show up in my condo in Texas, in San Antonio, probably in about 98 or 99. We were still living in that condo then. And they were there in their little dark blue uniforms, and there were three of them in the line in the living room. And I sat in front of them and was going to meditate with them. And I looked at these faces and I said, you have a history, that's for sure. And they looked at me with like right through me. Like I knew by their faces that they had a history, but they knew me and my history all the way back to wherever it begins better than I did. And I felt that. I felt that from my core. And it was hard to keep my eyes open then, I'm telling you. And this is another reason no one expects this. They don't expect it will be like this. They think of, the White House lawn and handing, cool, super cool cell phones that you can eat or whatever the hell they think. Wonderful stories, all of it's so fascinating, and with a nice modicum of fear to make it more interesting. Man, this is the change of the world. This is the change of everything that's coming. This is change, pure, total, complete change. And I'll tell you how to sum it up, and very simply, mankind is becoming conscious. Back in the day, I said this is what evolution looks like when it's applied to a conscious mind. And you're right about Darwin. He didn't know much about evolution, but he did know this, that it means change. And that's what's coming. And that's exactly what's happening to the human mind. The human mind is about to explode, and it's going to be hard. But in the end, it's also going to be wonderful because it is a new future for us.
Did past civilizations, not referencing ET, I'm going back to like the Sumerians and the Egyptians 5,000 years ago, where before amnesia set in, right, for us, did they understand what the soul was? Did they understand the power of us and being individuals? Did they have a full grasp of that, and then somewhere along the line we just let it go with materialism?
The earliest religious document in the world is the pyramid text in the Pyramid of Unas in Egypt. Mm-hmm. A wonderful, I don't know if you've been to Egypt. If you have and been in there, then you know it is an incredible, intricate, vast hieroglyph painted all around and carved all around the walls of this pyramid. And you see that and you think to yourself, now I've never been there, but I've seen very, very good pictures of it. I don't travel well, especially not in third world countries, so I've never been able to get myself to go to Egypt. Anyway, I wish I could, I should, but it is an absolutely incredibly intricate hieroglyph, highly sophisticated, created by a very sophisticated mind. And people who think, that was the old days, they were really, just a bunch of slope heads, forget it. They were highly brilliant people. Okay. In that text, there are a series of hieroglyphs about the spine and about the seven, which is referred to as a serpent, and about the seven smaller serpents that surround it and that feed impressions from gathered by the body into the spine and therefore into the second body, or what we would call the soul. 7. And they are called ta-nitter. Now, any scholar of Tantra will say, oh, well, it didn't start way back then. Yes, it did. We just forgot. They knew way back then, because I am talking to you not about a religion at all. I am talking to you about a science of the soul and the way it relates to the body and the way impressions come in. And if you look at the laws of Maat, M-A-A-T, you will see 42 different laws which are all designed to take you in the same place, to let you live a good life and die without regrets. Because then when you're weighed, and we are all weighed, we weigh ourselves when we die. I saw it happen with Annie. It is literally, how light are you? How able are you to ascend? And the fewer regrets you have, the more there is for you in the next life. And that's what this whole thing is about. It's what it's about.
We need to take a break right here. Hold on, Whitley. Stay right there. We'll pick this up when we come back. Awesome conversation tonight. Whitley Strieber is our guest. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Whitley Strieber. Tomorrow night, Nick Redfern. Wednesday night, Richard Dolan. Thursday night, Fader night, open lines all night long. Tonight, it's Whitley Strieber. And Whitley, right before the break, talking about the pyramid text, and I totally agree with you. Complex, incredible. I have to, what's your opinion of how it is possible that a civilization like not only the Egyptians at 3000 BC, but certainly the Sumerian culture too over in Mesopotamia at the very same time, suddenly rose out of nowhere, perfectly upright with everything, right? Science and agriculture, government, religion, music, schools, roads, infrastructure, knowledge, the cosmos, math, right? They were completely upright and functional. And then, of course, entropy kicked in and everything unraveled. But how is that possible that a civilization can rise out of the desert like that complete?
Well, probably because that's not what happened. There is something wrong with the conventional understanding of the past. Something wrong. And your listeners must know, just like I do, that if you go around the world, you look at Mohenjo-Daro, if you look at the things that Graham Hancock found under the ocean around Japan, if you look at, did I say Mohenjo-Daro? Nanmadol. If you look at the huge, at what went on at Sacsayhuaman and what's left there in Peru. If you look at the platform at Baalbek, at the Great Pyramid, it's so many different things in this world. What you see is the remains of a highly capable engineering that we can't do now. In fact, and that's inescapable. We can pretend it's not true. But pretending something isn't true has nothing to do whatsoever with science. Science is facing the unknown, and that's what's not happening in the conventional scientific community with regard to the past. And here's another thing. There's a website out there called it's a geodesy website. As we talk, I'll look up my links in my on my website and see if I can find it. Anyway, on this website, it shows that there is a geodesic line around the world that connects over a dozen ancient sacred sites. Only this line doesn't point at the physical North Pole. And in the past, such sites were usually oriented toward the pole or the pole star. It points 1,450 miles west of that, meaning that at some point in the distant past, that's where the pole actually probably was. Mm-hmm. And if there is such a thing as crustal shift, and I think there's a very good possibility that that is true, and we're going to talk in a second about, if you want to, about why it probably happens, then it is deep, so deep that it doesn't change the geology of the surface, but it changes the position of everything and causes the oceans to really, really get very, very dangerous for a while. And I think if something like that happened in the distant past, then it could be that a great civilization that had an entirely different way of addressing reality and an entirely different understanding of physics and so forth was destroyed, leaving only the things that were in the highlands at the time. So that could have happened. And why would it have happened? It would have happened because the weight of the water on the surface changed position. When did that happen? The end of the last ice age, when the poles melted, the glaciers melted, and suddenly all of that water, which had been trapped in the glaciers on the on the two poles, was taken by currents down into the mid-latitudes until the planet literally shifted on its crust in order to compensate for the change in balance.
Do you think that that there is a depository somewhere of this knowledge of previous civilizations? I mean, real intelligent civilizations that could go back, whatever, millions of years, tens of thousands of years. And
I have no idea.
Well, but my question is this. Is that the dogma that we have been living with through our educational system, that would be something as difficult to answer by world governments and religions as much as the ET question would be, and having to answer to that too as well. Is that the interest in keeping all of this hidden? Because that would certainly cause some anger.
It could be that they know that, and they're keeping it hidden because it leads inevitably to the revelation of the ET presence.
Sure.
I would think that maybe that's part of the reason there's so much weird stuff going on around Antarctica right now. And, there's Linda keeps finding these strange things. You talked about that face, and mm-hmm. I said my truth, which is I don't know. But if it is there, then what the heck is going on? Because that makes no sense. It reminds me of the face on Mars, which when Dick Hoagland showed it to me in September of 1985 in the apartment of Margot Adler and John Glideman in New York City, and I stood there and looked at it, and I thought, my God, how extraordinary. And I arranged for Mark Carlotto to do a study of that face. He was a specialist he worked for NASA, the NSA at the time, as a contractor, and he was an imaging specialist with highly developed equipment for that time. In fact, equipment that would still be, if it was in the public sector, probably pretty advanced now, for all I know. Anyway, he proved very conclusively that the face was a real thing. But then we come to the closer flyby. And lo and behold, it looks just like what NASA said it was, a pile of rocks. And Mark immediately got no publicity, but he showed very clearly how it had been changed. Someone had changed it. Now, what does that tell you? You're going to be talking to Richard Dolan tomorrow night. Why don't you ask him that question? Is there a breakaway civilization powerful enough to be on Mars? Is there some truth in that? And if not, then who changed it? Because it was changed. And now we go back to the face in the Antarctic, which looks eerily similar.
It does.
So what the heck is it all about? Why build these faces in the first place? What do they mean? If they are real, what mind is behind them? In other words, why would that matter so much to someone that they would build something like that? But that, for that matter, why would somebody build Göbekli Tepe, which it took probably over 1,000 years to build, and then over 1,000 years to bury
it?
Yeah, because you look at this, our civilization dates from about 600 BC is when it really started, when Judaism became organized around a single god, and the Greek intellectual world started up. That's kind of where we're from. So that's 2,600 years. We have no project in our civilization that has gone on anywhere close to 1,000 years or even 500 years.
That's right.
We can't do that. Or look at Stonehenge. Stonehenge took, we know this, and this is not speculative, this is established archaeology. It took 500 years to build Stonehenge. In other words, the people who worked on it were working on something that they themselves couldn't even, who were your ancestors 500 years ago? Do you have any idea?
Nope.
The answer is you don't. You don't. But they kept at it with a single goal for 500 years. Now, those are powerful civilizations. They may not have SUVs and skyscrapers, but a civilization is something that lives not in the world, only in the world around us. It lives in the mind. And the civilization that lived in those people's minds was far more powerful than ours. Far more.
How many, man, I hate to do this to you, but we're going to be going to overtime tonight, Whitley, so just pour another cup of coffee. We're not anywhere close to wrapping this conversation.
You told me 2 hours, man.
I know, man.
Okay, I'll go an extra half hour, but I'm an old fart. You can't do this to me.
You're not old. You're not old. Not yet. Not yet. We've got a lot to do, Whitley.
Not in the places that count. No.
We've got a lot to do yet in this life. Too much more to discover. Is this? Somebody just posted up here. Jimmy, have you told Whitley about your visit that you had? And I don't believe that I have. Now I'm going to make this very brief because I need to get to the other side of this visitation with you. But back in 1995, I'm living by myself in Sherman Oaks, California. Got a condo south of the boulevard. You know the area. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up. I think there's a burglar. Okay, that's what I think is going on. I'm not going to get into the details of everything, but I looked down at the foot of my bed, and there was sliding glass doors in my bedroom that went out to the balcony, and the blinds were open, so the starlight's kind of coming in. And standing in front of the sliding glass doors to my right is a dude, and he's about 4 feet tall, not short, not tall, about 4 feet tall, But we have a stare down that goes down for about 15 minutes. Blinking eyes, this thing. And I was pretty angry, right? I was waiting. I wanted some butt kicking to go down, but I couldn't move. The end of this is what happened. Eventually, I can move, and I turn on my lamp to my left, and I spin around for some Bruce Lee action. Right? That's what I anticipate, and he's gone. And now, this experience that I'm relaying to you is one thing, and I want your opinion on that, because later, many years later, I slept with the lights on for 10 years after that, and the TV, by the way. Many years later, I heard you talk about the blue guys, and that you laid out this idea about possibly them being from the other side, and maybe even death, or there could be. I'm paraphrasing here because you're very detailed in that. But with my experience that I just told you about, and what you have gone through, and the blue guys, what do you make of that when somebody brings you an experience of contact like I just did right now? What's your comment on that?
Now, it was with the blue guys? They were blue guys?
No. I've never revealed the shade of the skin. I want to keep that private. I'll tell you about that off of the air.
Okay, well, I can tell you about the blue guys, but because I don't know basically what is going on with, in other words, I don't know what your experience is. I can't address it directly. So, you had something going on, obviously, because you wouldn't have been experiencing it wouldn't have been like that if it was a normal experience. But I can tell you about the blue guys. I can tell you a lot about the blue guys. They've been in my life since I was a boy. The only memory I have from my childhood that has always been there. I went through a long period of not having any real memories about my childhood. It wasn't until Don Klein, during the second hypnosis session in 1987, noticed that I had spontaneously regressed to the age of 12, that I began to think in terms of my childhood, and a whole huge amount of memory came up, which I wrote The Secret School about. But this memory has been there always. Before that, I just didn't know what it was. I thought it was some sort of a dream. But what it was is this: the blue guys, they were around in my life a lot in those days, and they used to take me and other children, I don't remember who the other children were, on a kind of raft that would float above the neighborhood. And you could lean out over the sides of it and look down and see the neighborhood down below. And it was really, really fun. And they used to get all nervous and run around clapping their hands and gasping when we leaned too far out, because they were afraid we would fall off, but they would never touch us. And I remembered that as a dream until the Don Klein thing happened. I began to recover so many other memories. I thought to myself, my God, that's never been a dream. That was actually something that happened. Okay, that's number one with the blue guys.
Mm-hmm.
This is gonna take a while, so just be patient.
I'm patient.
Okay, number two with the blue guys. This is the second experience with the blue guys. Ann and I used to live on West 55th Street in Manhattan. And we would walk down 55th Street, across 8th Avenue, across 7th Avenue and Broadway, to 5th Avenue, where there were a lot of bookstores in those days, Doubleday's bookstore. And there was a big Brentano's bookstore, and Scribner's. It was wonderful. I love books, and my life is deeply tragic now because most of the bookstores have closed. It's something I never dreamed would happen. But anyway, we would go to the bookstores. And when we we went past a certain kind of dark little part of 55th Street. I believe it was between 7th and 8th. There was a little storefront in there where it was just a little storefront. It was always empty. There was a curtain, and in front of the curtain there was a chair. And every once in a while there would be a girl sitting in the chair who looked like, frankly, a prostitute. Only, this being America, not Amsterdam, there was no red light or anything. It was all very discreet. One night we're going home, and there's something going on in the horse store. We used to call it the horse store. The chair is on its side. The curtain's flapping back and forth like crazy. And this man in a suit is trying to get out, and little blue dwarfs are coming out from behind the curtain and grabbing him and dragging him back. And we see this. We watch it for a couple seconds. Annie says, let's get out of here. And we go home. We've run home, actually. And so we're going to call the police to tell them that this is happening. And I pick up the phone, and there was no 911 in those days. I'm looking up the police phone number. And we look at each other. I say, what am I going to say? This is New York. I mean, I can't say that a bunch of blue dwarfs were trying to kidnap a man out of a storefront to the New York City Police Department and have anything happen except a guffaw, or possibly they send someone over with a net. So we didn't call the police. We didn't know what to say. But I'm telling you this, we never went past the horse store again. Second, little blue guys. Third, little blue guys, and I'm getting to the end of this. And you're going to know something about the little blue guys that's going to surprise you in a few minutes. The third, little blue guys, I have an incredibly vivid dream. I am not in this world. I am in another world. This is still in the 70s, long before the communion experience or anything. There's a sort of a path, very nicely sort of paved path, very pretty, very curved and very nice looking. And an arch of triumph is there. And off in the distance to my left, to my right, is a hill, and cedars, like cedars of Lebanon, are on the hill. And to my left and down on the side of a bluff, which looks out over a huge expanse of what looks like desert, is a dark blue round building that's all tumbled down, that they tell me is a university. And I wanted to go to that university. And they were ready for me to go. So I start walking toward the university. And as you get closer to it, it's really tumbled down. And I say to one of them, why is it such a mess? It looks like it's in ruins. And he says, well, it's 1,000,000 years old, and the scholars aren't very good at maintenance. So
did he say that in jest, or?
Oh, it was just, they have a sense of humor. Never think they don't.
Right.
Okay. And so as I get closer to it, these strange taller gray figures with great big black eyes show up. They're not going to let me enter, because I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm terribly disappointed. I wake up abruptly and I am devastated. I'm just devastated. I wanted to go in there so badly. And now I know the truth of it. When I went there and wanted to go in so badly and they wouldn't let me, was when I matriculated. I've been in that university ever since. I understand that now. I sure didn't then. But in any case, that's the third. Now we're going to get to another level of this. Laurie Barnes was Ann's secretary for 15 years. Ann found Laurie by reading. She was reading letter after letter after letter, and she was saying, I need a secretary. I said, well, we'll call manpower. And she said, no, I'll find someone in the letters. She found people in the letters who she would pick up a letter and say, she's going to see the visitors, or he's going to have a contact experience at the cabin, and put the letter aside and invite him up. And it happened. She was absolutely amazing. And she herself never had any experiences. So anyway, she says, here's our secretary. And she hands me this letter. It's very nicely written, handwriting. And I read the letter, and I said, well, this says that she's a singer and an actress. She says, have you ever heard of her? I said, no. Well, look at that handwriting. That's the handwriting of a professional. She's a secretary. So she calls her up. She turns out to live half a block from us in Manhattan. And I hear Ann say, oh, good. Well, okay, well, why don't you come over right now and get started? I need you. I could use you right this second. That was the beginning of a 15-year period where she was our secretary. And she was a close encounter witness, which is what the letter was all about, of course. So here is her story. 1954. She's lying in bed about 11 o'clock at night. Her husband is a pianist, and he's out on a gig. And she notices movement. She's reading. And she looks down at the side of the bed, and there is this long row of these little, terrifying-looking little blue men. And she recoils in horror because it's 1954. You're not expecting that. Let me put it that way. And you see how human consciousness is changing? 1954, you had no idea. Now we're talking about it on the radio with insight, as you will see. In any case, she recoils and he says, do not fear us. No, do not be afraid. We're not here for you. We're interested in the girl child you're carrying, which, of course, she goes totally apeshit then. Right. Because she is pregnant, in fact. And it turned out it was a girl who's is still a very nice woman. And there's no mysterious connection that we can tell between her and the visitors at all. In any case, he then puts his hand on her wrist and says, why do you fear us so? And she says, because you're so ugly. And then he says something that I think is probably really important. He says, one day, my dear, you will look just like us.
Right.
And because they are human.
Right.
We're the tadpoles. They're the frogs, and they look like frogs, too. Anyway.
Yeah, continue. I just wanted to interject and say I remember the first time I heard these references from you about them. I went back. I thought about my own experiences, and I'm going to say, Whitley, I was uncomfortable. It was
because they can do things to you that are very uncomfortable, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute.
Continue.
Okay. Flash forward for many years. We're living now in San Antonio, and a dear friend is in a hospital. He's in emergency heart surgery. He's not expected to come out alive. We're there with his family. I see dead people. I mean, I'll be frank about it. I've seen them for most of my life. A lot of times I didn't know it, but now I do. And by that time, I was well aware of it. So he comes walking out of the operating room. And I immediately turn to Ann and say, he just died. And a second later, the surgeon comes out and gives his wife the bad news. Then I see in my mind's eye two of the blue guys, and they have him, and they are taking him, and they're putting him into a newborn baby in India, a little girl. And a soul, someone comes out of it. I can't explain that, but it was like a shift of some sort that took place. And here's why. He was not a really good man. He did some good things in the world, and he had a fine family, created a fine family. But he did also some real dark things. And if he had looked at the dark stuff, he would have gone. He would have been lost. They rescued him by whipping him into a body so fast that he didn't get a chance to see himself, but did get a chance to experience the life that he is experiencing now of poverty and enforced humility as a woman in a culture that's very poor, where women are not very well respected. And he's experiencing that, so it's balancing, his karma is balancing out. You know who they are? They told Laurie, we're soul techs.
Right.
They are the managers of our souls. And you remember the movie Ghost? Whoever wrote that intuited this or knew it, because those creatures that come up groaning up out of the dark, that's them. That's them.
Do you
I
remember?
think all this stuff is so wonderfully fascinating.
Wait, do you remember?
Some of it is true too. I believe it is.
Do you remember the movie Phantasm?
No, I do not.
Okay,
I never saw it.
Okay, B movie, horror movie. All right, but so well done. So Whitley, I'm serious. Forget about the B movie aspect and all of that and the horror side of it. Watch it. Because there's something.
I will watch it. I'm fascinated by a good horror movie.
Yeah,
as long as it's not too gory.
No. And you know what? There's some funny moments too, as well. Okay, but just the entire soul aspect of this and the physicality of these little guys. Just watch the movie. Watch the movie.
I will.
I'm sure Twitter's about to light up right now. Church, you're right. But. Is this something that and I've thought about this with you for so many years now. Is this something that we would expect to experience when we do pass over?
Yeah, I think that's quite possible, and it might even be that you're going to come face to face with Laurie Barnes. Or me or whoever. I mean, because I think that's a level some of us graduate to. I don't think it happened to Anne, interestingly enough, because I saw Anne after she died, and she was not in that form at all. She was very different. She was just a very, very beautiful version of herself. And I've seen a lot of souls, and not all of them have been like that at all. And I think that maybe one level. I think we're part of something that is really old and really complex. And you know what Annie said after? One of the things she said after she died was, well, first of all, as she died, she left a book open on the bookshelf here in this room. I've probably told this story on your show before.
Yeah, you did, yes.
Yeah, well, we don't want to go through it again. But anyway, she left the book open on a place that said that the universe began out of a single primordial quest for knowledge. And that she said after she died that before, underneath gravity, all reality is based on a yearning. There is something yearning for something, and that's why we exist. It's the love of God is what she's talking about. That's what's there. And they're part of it. We're part of it. We're all part of it. And they're manipulating, moving people around and trying to give people chances to better their souls and because this ultimately has always been the same thing from the very first moment it came into being. It's a journey toward ecstasy. That's what the universe is. That's what life is. That's what all of this is, a journey toward ecstasy. It's why Anne said again, after she died, she said, enlightenment is what happens when there's nothing left of us but love. And, we're all trying to get there. We're nowhere close. I mean, I can tell you this. I am enlightened. I am love itself until I get in my car and drive in the streets of Los Angeles. Then I'm a caveman.
Oh, man.
And not only that, I love it.
We all okay, that's a whole nother show, but you're absolutely right. I go through all of my faults come out when I drive, for sure.
Mine too. Ain't it fun?
I feel good. I was watching the astronomer that discovered the first exoplanet, Major, back in Switzerland in 1995. So watching an interview with him. It's about a year old, and he's out in his backyard and he's looking up at the Milky Way. Incredible, right? All the stars. And he looks at the camera and he says this. He goes, every star that you can see, he said, with my bad vision, I'm looking at 3,000 to 5,000 stars. With good vision, you can see more. But all of those stars up there, I discovered the first exoplanet in 1995. But now I know that every fifth star that we look at has a planet identical to Earth. right? And right, what a powerful statement. 1995, there were none. Now, him, of all people, says every fifth star has a planet identical to Earth. Right? The rest of them are gassy giants and everything. But that's a big number when we talk about the Milky Way. We're talking about 200 billion Earths, right? How many of those planets are aware of us? Is it just an infinite number of visitors coming here?
I've thought that maybe this is a school that everybody uses, and that all of us are from different worlds, and that this is a place that you get into, kind of, like Harvard or hopefully not Sing Sing, but
right.
In any case, that it's a place of, because it's such an incredible learning experience to be human. It's extraordinary, and I've often wondered if maybe that's what this is, and that it's because it's not peaceful, and it is wild, and it is crazy, and all kinds of horrible things can happen here, and you can do wonderful things and do horrible things, and you can die after an absolutely marvelous, beautiful life, or you can die having really screwed up. Or you can die having just not cared enough. And I wonder if it's like that everywhere. If this is not a kind of, if the university that the blue guys showed me was not just a little dark blue building on the side of a cliff, but this is it. This is it. I think this is the university. This is where we're here, and we're here to learn and to get an education. One of the first things Annie said after she died was, "It's a game. It's all a game, Whitley." But I didn't get the impression that it was a silly game. I thought the way she said it sounded like it was a really serious game.
But by saying that, I'm wondering. Right. I'm wondering if she. Wow, that expands my brain somewhat. What do you think she was referencing? Wow, man, that's what did she mean, Whitley?
What she meant was that we are engaged. Well, there were games in this world in the past which were really serious games. The gladiatorial games, before Rome became decadent and it became just a form of entertainment, were a religious ritual. The ball game played by the Maya was a very serious game. It's a serious religious ritual. I'm not saying those games are good. I don't think they were good. I think they're very brutal and foolish. But this game of life is very serious, because you could come out of this game an ascended soul. You could ascend into ecstasy from doing this. So, wow, is this a big deal, this game?
Why keep it hidden? Yeah, why keep it hidden?
If you don't keep it hidden, and everyone knows it's just a game, then it loses its force and its intensity.
But when we have the status quo completely blind to imagination, completely blind to the wonderment of everything that is, and so fixated on life, death, taxes, and a mortgage, right? And not even considering or pondering the wonder of it all. Why keep that part hidden? If we're going to advance, shouldn't the masses be aware?
I'm not even sure that this is the only place the game is being played. It might be being played in a lot of places, and the amount of time involved might be far greater than we can possibly imagine. It might not be that you can, you remember 5 or 6, I remember 5 or 6 past lives. it might be that you didn't have 5 or 6 past lives. You may have had millions of past lives on many, many different planets. Because this journey toward ecstasy might be something which the accretion of it is literally photon by excited photon over billions of years. We don't know what we are. We only know we're here now, passing through this life. But it could be that this is not the only place the game is played. It might be a much bigger deal than we think. And we also might be, many of us, or maybe all of us, much, much older than we would dare to imagine.
I wanted to ask you, we got past this earlier. I want to get this in before I say goodnight. I have interviewed many channelers. There is a lot of what I think is pretty solid, consistent information from around the planet. It's not singular. Is this communication something that you pay attention to, and the messages that are received?
I don't know. I can receive messages from Annie, and I think some of those messages might be real, that might genuinely have come from her. Mainly because some of the ideas are too good. They're better than the kind of stuff I come up with, like the things I talked about tonight. Mm-hmm. But, when I see these long, complicated channel things that seem like they're basically versions of this world kind of restated, and when I actually trying to live with the visitors, and they're so different, I just have to wonder if it's channeling or imagination for the most part. I don't know. With you? With me? What do you mean?
Is it imagination with you?
I don't know. I could be.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, though, in my case, because I have certain things that are kind of anchors, like the implant in my ear.
Right.
It's there. It's real. It's, in fact, there's a lot going on with it right now because it moved from the place where it's been for years, up in the top part of my ear, pinning of my ear, down about half an inch all of a sudden about 3 weeks ago. And now I keep having these periods where I have these kinds of pins and needles going through the side of my head. And when I'm meditating, the place where the implant is tingles. So that's real. I mean, that's physical stuff. So I can't say that everything about my experience is imagination. I think a lot of it might be misinterpreted simply because I simply don't have enough ground of truth, as it were, mm-hmm. to interpret it correctly. But no, not all of it is imagination, or that thing wouldn't be there.
I have had so many physical experiences and sightings and things like that, and that's great. That's amazing, but you put that stuff aside. If I didn't have any sightings or anything, the real physical experiences, there's the other part that I don't have answers for. And that's things like deja vu, crazy synchronicities, just inexplainable, intangible, untouchable experiences that there is something going on where this universe is electric and connected and multidimensional. That's the only thing that I can explain, and I'm waiting for science to catch up and help me understand, and the rest of the world, what is going on with these experiences.
Well, the implant works in two ways. One is, and this is actually a direct response to your question. It just sounds a little bit roundabout, or to your statement. One is that a little slit opens up in my right eye, and I see words typed in courier racing through. And those words are related to what I'm thinking about and working on, but it's not like a thesaurus. It's like more distantly connected words that it's like having a muse in your head, because it causes all kinds of unexpected connections and makes your ideas very big. It's like an amplifier. Mm-hmm. The other thing it does is when I ask it a question, a direct question, I don't always get an answer at all, I have to say. But sometimes I do. And the answer is always comes out of a synchronicity. That's how it works. And I literally use synchronicity as a research tool because of this, because it's so consistent. I would say 8 out of 10 of the questions I ask are answered in one way or another. And maddeningly, maybe 10 out of 10 are answered. I just don't get it sometimes. But it's an incredibly valuable research tool. And I'm very worried now because of these sensations I'm getting in my head. If it, is there some kind of radiation connected with it that is damaging to me? And I'm going to have a CT scan of it shortly, and there are going to be some studies done to see what's going on there, because something is. It's not the way it used to be.
Right. And how do you encourage? I try to do it. I try to do it, Whitley, to open people up at least a little bit. How do you encourage people to pay attention to synchronicities? I don't know how much in my life I've ignored, right? But I don't anymore, and I definitely pay attention when it happens. How do you encourage people to stop ignoring synchronicities?
You tell me. I ignore the darn things all the time, and it frustrates the hell out of me. You overlook them because they're not in the stream of ordinary life.
Right.
Like I have prophetic moments that I overlook, and there's always the same reason. Like when the hurricane was coming up a couple of weeks ago, there crossed through my mind a thought, the Bahamas will be okay. That is a prophetic thought that the Bahamas will not be okay. I've had those all of my life, where as soon as I think something like that, that's actually a warning. I think the opposite of what's actually going to happen, because I don't want to face what is going to happen. And so, but this time I thought, oh my God, the Bahamas are going to be destroyed as soon as that thought passed through my mind. And they were. So there's synchronicities, and there's other things like that are just very hard to catch on to. Maybe in a sense we feel like we're not supposed to do that. I don't know. Although I love synchronicities.
I do. I respond to them now. Well, you're right, though. Just so many of them we just enjoy it and let it go, right? And we don't respond to it.
Yeah.
I've had this crazy, I brought it up a couple of months ago on the show, but over the last year or so, I keep having this repetitive vision that I look up at the moon and it's like smoking, right? That there's something going on. Something has hit the moon or it's cracked. And now,
no,
I know. And now I constantly, every time I get the chance, I look at the moon and I'm wondering if that's the moment. And I brought it up on the air only because I couldn't let it go. And I do it now. I did it last night. I can't seem to let it go, but I felt that I needed to mention it. Just in case, right? But
Jimmy, let me tell you something.
I can't let it go.
You obviously don't know this. The first really intense warning I ever got from the visitors was this incredible thing where I looked out the window in a hotel in Colorado, as I recall, and the moon was exploding.
Really?
Pieces were flying off of it. This was 25 years ago. Now we have a situation where more and more asteroids are coming through this solar system. And just a couple days ago, one passed within a few 100,000 miles of Earth. We didn't even see coming.
Nope.
And, you look at the moon. Why is it so covered with craters? It's covered with craters because the moon is protective. It's protective. It protects us, but not completely. Jupiter also protects the inner planets because big stuff gets pulled in by Jupiter's gravity well. And doesn't hit us.
Too. All the time.
All the time.
Yes.
And the moon protects Earth. This thing, by the way, Earth is exactly within about 50,000 mile envelope of the perfect place for it to be, for everything in terms of water and so forth to be in balance. Without the moon, the orbital winds would be too fat to retard them. The orbital winds would be too fast for anything big to grow. The outer planets protect the inner planets. The moon protects us. There's no other planet in the solar system with a moon like ours. And we are rolling along behind a star that is perfectly suited for long-term stability, whereas most white dwarfs are very unstable. And I have to ask you, we talked about, well, maybe there was an ancient civilization here, maybe aliens came. Maybe it's even bigger than that. Maybe someone designed this as a life-generating machine. So when we look into the eyes of the visitors, we might be looking into the eyes of someone who is even older than we could possibly imagine and has done more than we can possibly believe.
Thank you so much, Whitley. What a great conversation tonight. Tell us about Unknown Country and Dreamland, and how often you get the new interviews up, and where everybody can go and check you out.
Okay, Unknown Country. First of all, the site is finally new, and it's not being screwed with all the time. It's pretty secure, I hope. And Dreamland comes every week on Fridays. It comes up on Fridays, and you can listen to it on Alexa. Just say, Alexa, play Dreamland. It's on Apple Podcasts. I guess you can therefore get it on iTunes. You can get it on iTunes Radio. You can get it. I think you play it at midnight on Saturday nights here.
That's right.
On
KGRA.
channel.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's around, but and it's also on my YouTube channel, W Strieber, user W Strieber. But basically, the place to go for is unknowncountry.com, and the site's got great news. It's a really excellent news site. News of the edge, but none of it's fake. It's all real, and a huge archive for people who are really interested. We're having some trouble getting the whole archive up because there was so much. It was screwed with so much over the years in the old website, but we're getting there, and it's a marvelous big archive of all kinds of fascinating stuff. So it's worth subscribing and worth going to and worth having fun with.
Whitley,
and I'm there.
And you're there. Thank you so much, Whitley. I look forward to our next conversation. Keep doing what you're doing. You're just absolutely unbelievable. I just want to thank. I just want to thank you for everything, and not only our friendship, but the Fadernauts and our community here, and of course going back and what you have meant to this community. Just thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing, Whitley.
Well, thanks, Jimmy. You do the same thing,
and enjoy the rest of your night off.
Yeah, you too. It's not your night off, but it will be soon. I think your show goes to 10:30.
No. I've got 5 minutes to dinner.
Oh, have a good dinner.
Thank you so much, Whitley.
Good night.
Whitley Strieber. UnknownCountry.com is right there. The links are at jimmychurchradio.com. Go and click, and Dreamland. Not only that, but Whitley's got all of his blogs there. He's got all of Annie's stuff and a decade's worth of archives of articles and links and blogs and videos and interviews. Absolutely incredible. Unknown Country. I've been going to Unknown Country. I can't even think the first time that I spent time over there. All right. Thank you so much, Whitley. Great conversation. And there might be a Jimmy Church surprise coming up on Dreamland here in the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to say anything, but just stay on top of Unknown Country and go over and help support unknowncountry.com. With that, we've got a very, very, very busy week here on Fade to Black. Tomorrow night is Nick Redfern. He's got 2 books that he has just released, nearly back-to-back. that we're going to be discussing tomorrow night. One is the Alien book, A Guide to Extraterrestrial Beings Here on Earth. And the second book, Flying Saucers from the Kremlin, that is going to surprise you. So we're going to go deep into both of these books tomorrow night with Nick Redfern. On Wednesday, it is Richard Dolan. Now, Richard's live stream and information that he has been releasing over the last couple of months have been pretty intense. So we're going to try to get caught up on all of that on Wednesday night with Richard. He just got back from Toronto from the conference that went down up there, and I heard it was just amazing. So we'll talk a little bit about that too as well, what went down in Toronto this past weekend. Thursday night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. My point to the show tonight, before I get out of here, is that Friday, nothing happened. We were all on pins and needles. I was very nervous about something getting out of control. When you go to, I'm talking about the Storm Area 51 event, the phenomena that is flash mobs, and suddenly you see 500 or 1,000 people break into dance into a town square that 10 seconds before were just walking around acting normal. That's the part that I thought may materialize out there north of Las Vegas. I'm just glad that that didn't go down. And they were ready. They were ready. But we got through it. It's another week. It's amazing. Tonight, Whitley Strieber, thank you so much. UnknownCountry.com. Tomorrow night, Nick Redfern. Wednesday night, Richard Dolan. Thursday night, open lines all night long because it is Fader night. Fade to Black's executive. Oh, I got to give a big shout out to Susie Q. That's right. Susie Q. Frankie Four Fingers playing canasta with me on the table. It's pretty cool. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Syndication is KGRA The Planet. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Until tomorrow night, right here, Nick Redfern. I want everybody to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.